So the differences between my husband and I are numerous, and some of them are pretty vast. In fact, if you didn't know us intimately, like much of the people at this table do, you might wonder, like, how do they even stay together? They have so many dissimilarities. But we've managed. 2 weeks ago, we had our anniversary together, and we've been together now for 33 years. And yes, you can absolutely clap. I tell people gay relationships are like dog years, so that's like 180, 190. I'm not good at math. But for all that we disagree on, there was one thing that we did very much agree on, and that was absolutely no wedding. Now, that makes me sound like an ogre, like I'm anti-marriage or anti-wedding or anti-love, but none of those things are true. I'm talking about the late 90s and early 2000s, when marriage wasn't legal for everyone. And we were going to so many of our friends' commitment ceremonies, and these were lovely, extravagant affairs with all the pageantry and the cost of a real wedding without any of the benefits that actually come from marriage. And we would leave those things just a little more jaded than the previous one, going like, we will never spend tens of thousands of dollars on a party. That's just ridiculous. And so I'll give you an example, though, of one of our differences. One of the things I think about that comes to mind so quickly is our Starbucks order. Now, I love Rob, and I have committed his order to memory, so when I go to Starbucks to order for him, I have no problem. He, on the other hand, requires that I text message him my order every single time, because even though my order has not changed, he still refuses to commit it to memory. Rob is a grande black coffee. I am a venti iced caramel macchiato with 1 extra pump of caramel, non-fat, 2 extra shots of espresso, 1 Splenda, no whip, upside down. What's so hard about that? In 2005, Rob was sick with the flu at Christmas time, so he was in bed. And that's sad by itself, but then I realized he was going to miss the annual family argument. And so that makes it double sad. Because every year it was family tradition that we have this big blow up in the kitchen. And I was just so used to it. It was just part of our family culture. And other families might refer to it as making tamales. But for us, it was the annual family argument, because my job was just to mix masa, and I've learned to stay out of it, right? Because my sister and my mom are getting ready to go at it. And it came down to this. How many of the pork tamales are going to have raisins in them? I know, right? Oh, I think Lottie. Yeah, he would have loved those. So... But my mother grew up, both my grandparents were farm laborers, and big Catholic family, not a lot of money. And so my grandmother would stretch the tamales, the pork, by adding raisins. And she would always tell my mother in Spanish, Christmas is so sweet, and so are weddings, and they deserve sweet tamales. And so my mom grew up eating sweet tamales, and she loved them. And so even though she loved them, she couldn't convince us to love them too. So we always had this argument. And then I got to thinking, gosh, we only make tamales for Christmas and weddings, and we haven't had a wedding in the family for a long time because all my siblings had already been married. And I got this really sad feeling, like out of nowhere, because I thought, what if by the time marriage becomes legal, my mother passes? That year she was 70, and I kept thinking, I can't imagine having a wedding without my mother. I just couldn't imagine that. And I got this really sad feeling, and all of a sudden I just piped up in the middle of their argument and said, what do you all think of a wedding? And they stopped arguing and looked at me and said, who's getting married? I said, Rob and I. And they said, oh my God. The scream that was so loud was, I couldn't believe that Rob couldn't hear it in bed across town. And they were like, when, where, have you set the date? When did you propose? All those questions, right? And I said, I haven't proposed yet. And they said, oh my gosh, when are you going to propose? Did you get the ring? Let me see it. And I was like, no, I haven't proposed yet. And then I had this thought, oh yeah, that's right, I probably should have talked to Rob before I brought this up. But knowing Rob, I did not want him to ruin the idea of the wedding by saying no. So I said, we're just not going to tell him. And they were like, what? I was like, well, you know, his birthday's coming up in 4 months. His family's flying out from Ohio for his 40th birthday. We'll just make it a wedding instead. And we just won't tell him. To me, that seemed perfectly sane, right? And even though my family thought it was a crazy idea, they went along with it, right? Now, the first question, anytime I've ever mentioned this story, that everybody always asks is, how on earth do you throw a wedding for 300 people with mariachis, bagpipers, 10 wedding cakes, and Rob doesn't know that this is going on, right? Well, again, the difference is between Rob and I, right? If I tell, Rob, there's a surprise and you'll learn about it tomorrow, he says, okay. If you tell me there's a surprise and I'm going to learn about it tomorrow, the Inquisition begins. Is it measured in acreage? Is it measured in bedrooms, square footage? Is it measured in horsepower? Is it measured in carats? Is it bigger than a bread box? It will continue that slow drip of questions on his forehead until he cracks like a thin egg and just says, okay, we're going on a cruise, right? Whatever. That's the difference between the two of us. So I told him in the car as we were driving, I said, with your birthday coming up, I think, especially since your family's coming from Ohio, we should probably make it extra special. So I'm going to add some things to your party, and I think I'd like it to be a surprise. And he said, okay. And I said, along with those surprises, I think the budget might be a little bit higher than what we originally talked about. And he said, okay. And I tell you, it was all I could do to keep from picking up that phone and calling my sister and trying to talk to her in code. The Eagle has just written a blank check. I repeat, the Eagle has just written a blank check. So I've led many conference committees, and so I had 4 months to plan a wedding for 300 people, and so I did it just like I would do a conference. I was the chair of the wedding. I asked my friends and family to be involved. I had a chair of venue, a chair of catering, a chair of music, a chair of guest lists and invitations, and I said, we meet every Sunday at 2 p.m. You better be prepared with a report. And it came off. The day came, and Rob said, what am I wearing to my birthday party? And I said, it's so totally casual, like a sweater, jeans, I don't care. So we walk into the Sacramento Galleria in Sacramento, which is this beautiful atrium, 3-story building. And he was like, my birthday party's here? And I said, yes, just enjoy it, okay? We have to be here before the guests get here. And he said, okay, but the guests were already there. So we walked in, and again, mariachis, everybody's dressed formally. All my brothers are in tuxedos, and Rob's brother's in a tuxedo, and everybody's wearing formal attire. And he's like, what is going on? So I take his hand, and we go up to the balcony that overlooks all the guests. And I said, we're here to celebrate Rob's birthday. And what would birthday be without a happy birthday song? So we're singing him happy birthday, and he's looking at me, and the what the F look has not come off his face yet. And I said, then the other reason that we're here that Rob doesn't know about, but all of you know about, is this. I got down on my knee, and I asked if he would remain with me for the rest of my life. And then he cried, a little bit like he's doing right now. But this one was the ugly cry, And then he punched me in the arm really hard and said, I can't believe you did this, and I can't believe I have to get married in a sweater and jeans. I was like, that's been taken care of. So we went downstairs to get into tuxedos that I had already planned the week before. A friend of mine that works for the Sacramento Opera walked up to us, and I told him, coached him, there's a fake event happening next month. We're going to need formal attire. We go to the store. I'd already been to the store the day before, talked to the manager, said I need to get him into this tuxedo because it fits my color scheme of navy. taupe, and gold. And knowing Rob, he will walk up to the least expensive, most boring tuxedo, but he's not going to wear that. She's got this. So Rob walks up to the cheap tuxedo, and she says, "Oh, are you all going to go to that opera event next month?" There was a gay couple in here before, and they just got that tuxedo. I said, "That's why you need this one, Rob." And he's like, "Ugh, okay, fine, whatever." Got him in the tuxedo that I wanted him in, right? And then we're doing the vows, and as I give him the ring, he looks down and recognizes it because it's the one he had picked out just a few weeks before under the ruse that a friend took him shopping because he was going to get his boyfriend a ring and had Rob try on rings and say, "If you were going to get a ring, which one would you want to get?" And then called me and said, "It's at this jewelry store, it's this, model and this size." And so he got his ring. There was a lot of moving parts, and I don't want to sound like Bridezilla up here, right? But I got to have the wedding I wanted, and I didn't have to make any compromises. And I think that's really what's most important about this love story, really. But there's a few memories that I will take away from that day that I will absolutely never, ever forget. One is, in our family, it's a tradition that after the first dance the couple has as a married couple, the brothers of the bride line up and cut in. And I was so surprised when my brother Matthew tapped me on the shoulder and asked if he could cut in to dance with Rob. And I looked and saw my brother Peter was next in line. And I didn't expect that. I didn't ask them to do that. I really didn't. And I didn't expect that they would, but they surprised me with that. And the other thing was my father, who is a man of few words, some people would say no words, who had given toasts at all of my siblings' weddings that consisted of, "To the happy couple." And I was fully prepared that when I handed him the microphone, that's exactly what he would say. But instead, he raised his glass and said, "I will admit that I did not understand the love between Solis and Rob when I first met Rob." He said it was foreign to me, and I really tried to understand it, and I struggled. He said, but when Solis was in the Navy, and he got deployed to the Gulf War, and I saw the look on Rob's face, and his worry, and sadness, and I realized that must have been the same look his mother had when I went off to the Korean War. And he knew that the love was the same. The love is exactly the same. And there was nobody with a dry eye at the wedding. We danced the night away. We had a wonderful time. And it's been a great journey. I wouldn't have given it up for anything. And so what I want to reinforce is that I thought that weddings were for the couple. But I now know weddings are really for everyone. The family, I'll never forget the look of my mother that day looking up at me as she gave me away, and Rob's mother when she gave him away. And as we prepare to go to Sacramento in just a couple weeks for Thanksgiving to spend time with family, my mother's now gone. She passed away a few years ago. I'm looking forward to sharing that time with my family. And I have to tell you, the annual argument has ended because we've all accepted that a small portion of those tamales will have raisins in them. And we each take at least one bite to remind us that Christmas, Thanksgiving, and weddings are sweet enough that they deserve a sweet tamale. Thank you.